This is one of my favorite months to talk, and especially on the topic of Purim, for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is because it's uh, it's one of those things in life that you tend to think it's the opposite of actually what it is. I mean, part of the reason for that is because of what we celebrate it. It's one of the few holidays where we promote drinking to such an extent, although many people today don't. But nonetheless, the essential halacha is to drink until you don't know the difference anymore between who was that again? Yeah, right. Borach Mordechai and Arahaman, right? That's the idea, and that right off the bat, that's from the Gemara itself. That's what the Talmud itself says. So, and there's actually famous stories. In case you didn't take it seriously, that they thought they were just joking about this, there are episodes where they actually get very drunk to the point of doing some, dangerous stuff. They'll recover, Baruch Hashem in the end, but that's the halacha, which is very unusual because of the fact that in Judaism is I mean, as much as we talk about emotions and we have such an emphasis on joy and simcha and pleasure and things like that, but for the most part, it's an extremely intellectual way of life. We have a Torah with over 300,000 some odd letters in it, and stories and mitzvahs. We have an oral law, which is made up of the Shulchan Aruch and countless works trying to explain it. One of the famous stories and kind of like ironies of Jewish history is the Rambam, Maimonides. In his time, it was very hard to get your hands on a set of Talmud. They weren't printing presses yet at that stage. They're all handwritten. It was very hard to get that, and there weren't a lot of rabbis around to teach. So and the Jewish people were going deeper into exile. It was getting even worse. So he decided to try to write a work. He secluded himself for 10 years, basically. And he worked on going through the entire Talmud and taking out the laws that we need to live by, even the ones not, even for temple times, and then making halachic decisions as to what the actual halacha was, a 14-volume compendium that he said would make it that you wouldn't need to have any more books after that, any more svarim. You have this, you have the Rambam, Maimonides, Chazaka, and you will be able to learn all that you need to know, like the first version of the Shulchan Aruch that we follow by today. And the irony of history, and on him as well, that no book has, other than the Chumash itself, has spawned more books to try to explain and understand what he was saying and why he said it, what the sources were, than his work itself. But look at the yeshivas. Look at people learning Gemara every single day and having deep discussions and arguing back and forth. And I mean, just look at in a shul. I mean, how many other places of worship have as many lessons printed out? I mean, to the point that we don't know what to do with all of them. We have shemas for these things and try to put them to one side, but so many different pages on the parsha and different topics and issues, and some for the children. It's an intellectual religion, no matter how you cut it. Judaism is a very intellectual religion. Why would the Torah all of a sudden, or the rabbis at least, because it's not in the Torah per se, but why would the rabbis come along and sanction just the opposite, almost to lose your dust? So obviously that doesn't mean that. That's a mistake off the bat. People make a mistake about that. The rest of the world tends to drink to drown their troubles. The Jewish people drink despite our troubles. In other words, a lot of people become inebriated because they want to forget about the world. They want to forget what's bothering them. Now, the truth is, even when you're drunk, you don't really forget about it, but somehow something happens to the brain where you feel less stressed out. But that's not us. That's not the way that we do things. And, there's even, a certain amount of drinking you're supposed to do, a person does as an avol, as a mourner, because of the significance of wine and what it's supposed to do for us. So we'll get back to that a little bit later on, part of the discussion, but that's off the bat. One of the questions you see that Purim is very different. Another reason why it's very different is because the rabbis point out that over time, the holidays that we now celebrate, starting with the Messianic era, will stop being holidays. Hanukkah will be the first to go. You won't need a holiday of Hanukkah. Why? Because every Jewish holiday, especially the ones in the Torah, but the truth is even the rabbinical ones of Purim, Hanukkah, all the Jewish holidays are really like channels or portals to future times in history. Right now, God is very hidden. Right now, nature is very strong. Right now, history seems to be very random. Once Mashiach comes and we get this world in order and get things, straightened out to where they're supposed to go, so then God's not going to be so hidden anymore. As we say every day in Elenu, that the God will be one, his name will be one, the whole world will recognize God as the king, and the world will finally become the way it's supposed to become. So in that at that point in time, then the light of God and the light of Torah becomes so pronounced that it'll become an everyday reality. Right now, we don't have that. Right now, in order to access the light of even the Messianic era, which is what Hanukkah allows us to do, we have to celebrate Hanukkah. Hanukkah is an opening; it's a door to that light. But when the holiday is over, the door shuts. But in the time of Mashiach, the Messianic era, that light will be every day. It will shine and illuminate. It will be Hanukkah every day, so to speak. Now, you won't have to light the menorah every single day and wash out of the glasses non-stop. It'll be different mitzvah, different reality. But that's the idea. And then later on, as we go deeper into history, then Pesach will stop being a holiday because every Sunday will be Pesach without the cleaning, without having to make a Seder, without having to haul the trouble. You can make a Seder if you want to, but all the things that we identify negatively with Pesach, they won't be there anymore. And then Monday will become Rosh Hashanah once a week. I won't go, it's a longer discussion. But the point is that the reason why the holidays are becoming batal, they're becoming eliminated, is because we'll no longer need a special day to access the light, because we'll be in a period of history where that light will be available all the time, because we'll be so much more spiritual. The last holiday to be canceled out, the last holiday to stop being a holiday, is Purim. Purim is will even in the after 6,000, when we start entering the period called the world to come, Alom Haba. So at that point in time, Shabbos will be every day. When we talk in benching, we say Birchar Hamazon, we say, the Yom Shekulo Shabbos, that the Yom Shekulo Shabbos, the day that's completely Shabbos, is talking about the millennium from 6,000 to 7,000. So the light of Shabbos will be every day at that time. You won't need Shabbos once a week to be able to have Shabbos, to have the light of Shabbos. Then in the next millennium is the light of Yom Kippur, without the fasting, without having to work, without you won't need shoes anyhow at that stage of the game. But all the negative things we do here to try, the difficult things to try to get into the holidays, you just have the light, you just bask in the light of God on a higher level. And then after that, right, the last holiday to be canceled out will be Purim at that point. So what is that telling us? That's telling us that Purim is extremely holy. It's more advanced, and it's a higher level of divine light than even Yom Kippur, than even Shabbos and Pesach and Shavuos and Sukkot, which is not the way it seems down here, not in the world we're living right now. Right now, it seems just the opposite. Even Hanukkah, which doesn't have all the mitzvahs of Purim, in a sense seems holier because you light candles and you sit and you watch them and you contemplate what they represent in the story. But Purim, people get dressed up and they drink and they're having a blast. They're going in the streets. It's the most social holiday we have. People going house to house, b'shlach manos, meeting people, talking to people. It doesn't seem it's like such a serious holiday. But that's the first sign that it usually is. Again, we'll get back to that point, but these are points, these are ideas that make a person stop and say, wait a second, what's going on? What is Purim? What is the opportunity of Purim specifically that I'm supposed to be accessing, and how do I do that? So everyone complains today about, everyone I come across for the most, I certainly complain about it, but the world, it's not what it was 35, 40 years ago, at least that I remember. Back in the 80s and the 90s, there's always mishugas. There's always people, doing things that they shouldn't be doing. It's a crazy, people doing, but overall, the world coming off World War II seemed more conservative. People seem to be more focused on the things that count most in life. And then came the 90s, and then came 2000, and all of a sudden the world seems to be off course once again. It's not a new pattern. It's not new. This happens all the time in history. It's a cycle that happens all the time. But we're coming off. I was born in 1959, so before that, I don't know what was going on at that stage. And even in the 60s, I was still quite young, so I wasn't aware of too much. But you start to grow up, you see the world, and it was a very pleasant period of time to grow up and to be a Jew. And as a result of that, we got used to that and we expected it to stay. And all of a sudden, come the Twin Towers. Actually, before that comes Intifada, we saw the world switch from one side to the other side. You can see the difference happening already in 1982. In the war in Operation Galilee, I was actually in yeshiva at the time. I was a bocher in yeshiva at the time, and for our pastimes and for downtime, we used to buy things like Time magazine and Newsweek just to see what's going on in the world, and have, something to read it, on our spare time. And the war was going on, and Newsweek covered Operation Galilee. And I'm reading this article, and it says in it was blaming Israel for the war, saying that they shouldn't be fighting it, even though clearly we had no choice. We weren't looking for it. But the comment that the person made, I'd never heard before until that time, and that he says, when will Israel realize that the statute of limitations has run out on the Holocaust? This is 1982. This is 1982. Well, that's already 40 years ago. When it never runs out. How could you say a thing like that? He was criticizing Israel for attacking Lebanon, going in there against Hezbollah, because we have this complex going back to to World War II that no longer is valid to. And I said to a friend of mine that I said, this is a change. The world's changing. This is the beginning of it. You can see it right now. It's actually happening a little bit earlier than that, but then can the intifada. It's like it's been becoming crazy and crazier as time goes on. But now, living in the world today, things are going on. I mean, I've been tracking these changes because I write books, and I write a Parsha sheet, and I try to comment on these things and provide a Torah perspective. So I pay attention to all these changes on an ongoing basis, and how they work with Torah, don't work with Torah, and it's dramatic, and it's not just dramatic, but it's not healthy, to say the least, from a Torah perspective for history. So where is that coming from? How does that fit into the entire thing? But people look at the world and they say the world's upside down today. So it's a common expression. People use it. They'll use it anytime, whenever they feel that it's not in consonance with what they think the world should be like. But sometimes you hear people say it, even though what they're talking about, from your perspective, maybe your world's upside down, not the world itself. But in general, usually it's because people see things happening, going on, just don't make sense. They just don't make sense. The alliances that people have, the comments that they make. And more importantly, is where's God? Especially since October 7th. That was one of the first episodes like that we've had in a long time. And people, like, how could that happen? And not just how could that happen, but how the world allowed it to happen and continue to happen, and then support the other side and even accuse us of genocide. Like, that's upside down. So there's a story in the Gemara, very important story in the Gemara, that it's very insightful, but it's one of these things that so many people, right? They see, not, first of all, not everyone sees these things, but those who even see it, they don't think much about what they're looking at, and what it means in a deeper sense. And what's the story? The story, I'll read it to you. I just actually wrote it out so that I could read it to you. When Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the time of the Mishnah, back in the time of the Romans, right, was sick, the son, right? His soul left him and he died temporarily. He had what they call a near-death experience. He became sick and he died. They thought that was it. However, he came back, because in those days they could do things like Techis Amesim, resurrecting the dead, or even just their prayers were strong enough to cause miraculous recoveries even after the person was dead. Whatever, it doesn't say how he came back, but he came back. And when he came back, right, his father asked him, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi asked his son, Rabbi Yosef, what did you see where you were, right? Well, you got there. You went to the next world. You crossed over, as they say, right? What did you see? What did you experience when you were there? So he answers back, he says, I saw an upside down world. I don't know if he meant that everybody was walking on the ceiling, right? But he said, I saw an upside down world. What does that mean? He said, what is up over here is down over there, and what is down over here is up over there, right? That was his explanation. That's what he said. In other words, completely different, different set of values, perspective. I mean, it's the world to come. It's like, angels fly, but that's what he says. And his father answers back and says to him, he says, no, my son, you didn't see an upside down world. You saw the world right side up. This is the world that's upside down. But you didn't notice it because this is what you're used to. If everyone's walking on the ceiling, that becomes the floor for the most part. But what does that mean? What is an upside down world? But why that terminology? So the Megillah actually provides the clue. It actually tells us, and this is key to understanding what Purim is all about and what we're supposed to get from Purim. But this is what it says, right? The Jewish people, we know the story. I don't need to repeat the whole thing. We're talking post-victory, right? After they defeat Haman, after they hang him and his 10 sons, and I'm sure you've all seen the connection between what happened with them and the hints of the Holocaust in the future. Built it right into the Megillah itself to do with the Nuremberg trials, which are absolutely remarkable. Just for those who are not familiar, I'll just throw a little bit in. But 10 people were hanged in Nuremberg. There was supposed to be 11. There's supposed to be 11, but what was the name? Was it Himmler? I think it was. One of them killed himself in his jail cell. He committed suicide. So as a result of that, there was only 10 in the end, which there's supposed to be 11, but there was only 10. Why is that significant? Because in the Megillah, when Achashverosh, after he allowed the Jews to fight back and they defeated Haman and they hanged the 10 sons of Haman as well, right? All those names we say really quickly in the Megillah reading, right? So after that, he turns to Esther and says, what else can I do for you? That you've already got your revenge. What else can I do for you? And she answers back and she says, if it pleases the king, we should be able to do the same thing tomorrow. Now, it's a little ambiguous. We don't know exactly what she means, but they already killed the sons. So what are you going to do tomorrow? So someone came along and realized and noticed that in the names of Haman's sons, 3 letters are smaller than the rest of them. And the gematria, the numerical value of those 3 letters, happened to equal the Jewish year that the Nuremberg trial took place and they hanged the 10 sons of Haman, or these 10 Nazis in the end. Remarkable Torah code and connection. But across time, that's a discussion for another time why that would be the case and what But Amalek, it's all part of the same story. There was a whole discussion about whether Hitler himself had the status of being from the tribe of Amalek, that was the mortal enemy of the Jewish people and God's personal enemy, mentioned at the end of Parashat B'Shalach. But after having done all that, and now we're already into the celebratory stage of the Purim story, it says the following thing. V'shnemasar chodesh hu chodesh Adar, right? The 12th month, which is the month of Adar, the last month of the year before you start the year according to the months, not Rosh Hashanah, but Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah of the months, the Mishnah says, right? So we get to the 12th month, right? B'shlosha asar yombo, right? And the 13th day of that month, Asher higia devar hamelech v'daso lasos b'yom asher sibru oivei haYehudim l'shlot behem, right? That was when they got the permission to go out, the enemies of the Jewish people, to go conquer and destroy the Jewish people. Haman got the permission for Achashverosh. That was the time to do it, right? And it turned around completely, 180 degrees. Right? Asher yishlu ha'yudim hema b'sanim. Instead, the Jewish people, they were the ones. That was the day that the enemies were supposed to go out and kill Jews, big, huge, massive pogroms. But instead, the whole episode unfolds with Mordechai and the stories that go on and how it works out and unfolds, and then eventually Mordechai gets permission and the Suda with Esther, and then she reveals that Haman is the enemy, not the good guy, but the bad guy. So they get permission instead to defend themselves at that time, because once a royal edict has gone out to do something, they did for some crazy reason, they couldn't pull them back again. So Achashverosh said, I can't cancel the Gezer, I can't cancel the edict I made for them to kill the Jews, but what I can do is make a new one to give the Jews the permission to defend themselves, and you can kill whoever you have to kill, and then, and that's what happens. So v'nafachu. So they turn it around completely. And we celebrate that. We talk about it. It's this complete absurdity how it goes from one to the other. And that's basically the whole Indian, the whole matter of Purim is how the absurdity of how quickly things can change in history, for the better and for the worse, God forbid, but in this case, for the better. But what's significant is that the word v'nahafuch actually can be read v'nun hafuch. You can split up the word, right? Nun, hey, fe, vav, chafsafit, right? The hafuch. You can make it actually just read it as nun hafuch, which literally means upside down nun. That's what it means. Okay, but so what? Upside down nun, great. What have we saw? Nafuch makes sense. The events turned around. Why go ahead and do this and split up the word and say really it's also nun hafuch, upside down nun? Where we even come across this concept of upside down nuns? So a nun is a letter in the aleph base, so it's upside down. We do. There's a very important place where an upside down nun comes into effect. Where is that? So it says that in Parshas Bahalosecha in the Chumash, we have one parsha, but it's divided into three parts. It talks about the beginning, the Jewish people leaving Mount Sinai. And then it gets the Vihi ben Sa'aron, which we say those words, we take the Torah out of the Arna Kodesh, and that lasts a couple of psukim, and then we go back to another parsha. So there's actually three sections. There's the part before Vihi ben Sa'ah, there's Vihi ben Sa'ah itself, and the part after that. And if you look into a Chumash, and even if you look at the Sefer Torah, but even a regular Chumash, you'll notice that the section is divided with upside down nuns, like almost like quotation marks. You put things in quotation marks so that you have the first section, an upside down nun, and then you have Vihi ben Sa'ah, and then another upside down nun, and the rest of the parsha. So the Gemara, some say that the Torah is actually 7 books. Vihi ben Sa'ah counts as 1 book, but the point is you have upside down nuns right there. Okay, so at least we found something meaningful to do an upside down nun. But the question is, why that letter specifically? Why not use a yud? Why not use a dollar or something? Why specifically a nun? And what's the meaning of that in the end? Why is it there in the first place? If that's not its place, so why put it there? So Tosfos explains, one of the commentary, Rashi's grandson explains right over there, because the Jewish people made 2 mistakes in that parsha. They did 2 averos, and we didn't want to put them back to back. That wouldn't have looked good. So we split them up instead. What were the 2 sins they did? Well, one was that they left Mount Sinai too early. God said, let's pack up and let's get going. And like kids, literally, who hear the bell go and run out of school, the Jewish people ran away from Mount Sinai. They had to go. It was time to go. But at least they should have turned to God and said, do we have to? Can't we just stay a little bit longer? This is the place that you spoke to us, and this is the experience of Torah. Who knows if we'll ever have an experience like this ever again in the rest of our lives? I don't want to go. Like a little kid at a birthday party. I don't want to go home right now. Right? No, I'm sorry. I understand. I appreciate that, but we need to move on. We need to get there to Israel. Okay, that would have been the proper. That's not what happened. Oh, goody. Let's get out of here as fast as we possibly can. That was called a chet. That was called a sin. What was the second sin? The second sin was they complained about the man, which is all tied together the same thing. Do you ever notice how the word for the man, you want to say the man, you say Haman. Haman. Not just that, but the word Haman itself actually is Haim Nun. They are 50. So what's this 50? What's the Nun? Well, Nun is 50. 50 is Nun, right? But what is that? Oh, okay. So then we go back a little bit further. Because the Gemara says in the Darim, the Gemara says that when God made the world, he made the world with Nun, Shari, Bina. 50 gates of understanding. Moshe got 49, although he got the 50th on the last day of his life. How do we know that? Where'd he die? Where did Moshe die? What mount did Moshe die on? Now you're all muted, so I'll answer for you, right? He died on Har Nevo. That's the mount called Har Nevo. But Har Nevo is Har Nun Bo, meaning on this mountain, he got the 50th, Nun. So it turns out that the Nun is the 50 Shari, Nun Shari Bina, the 50 gates of understanding, and that's the whole basis of Torah. Godly knowledge, right? Hashem's knowledge that we get through Torah, that comes through a level called Bina. It's filtered down to a level that we can use and access and to learn and to teach all of those things, right? That is based upon a concept called the Nun Shari Bina, which is the basis of all of our Torah knowledge. Really all of knowledge, because the whole world was made with it, but there are different levels of it. So when we are learning Torah, that's what we're trying to access. That's what we need. You want to have a close relationship with God, you have to know and learn the Nun Shari Bina. If you want to grow spiritually, you have to access the Nun Shari Bina. If you want to be righteous on any level, you have to access that's the knowledge, specific knowledge that directs you. Now, it comes out through the mitzvahs. It comes out through the stories and the Torah we learn. You have to know how to access it. But the deeper one goes, the more they're able to access it, then it's mashpia, then it affects you, then it influences you and causes you to grow. What it really does is it brings out your soul. How do we know that? Because another Gemara, another source, these are all important sources. I know source, but it's important to know these things. One of the things the Gemara says is that before a child is born inside the womb, an angel comes down and teaches the child Kol Torah Kula, the entire Torah. And then right before you're born, right, this little channel over here, right, is clearly not for runny noses, because if it was, it'd be two of them, one for each nostril. We don't have that. We just have one in the middle over here. So what's it for? And there's even sides, so you can't even, what's it for? So the Gemara says that's where the angel touches a person to make them forget what they learned, There's even a story that someone was born without that little channel, a child, and that he had exceptional, they brought him, I think, to the Chazon Ish, if I'm not mistaken, one of the Gedolim of yesteryear, right? And he was excelled from a very young age at Torah, like more than even Ilu in the end. And I don't, that's the story, but regardless of that, that's what the Gemara says. The only question is, what's the point of teaching me all of Torah if I'm meant to forget it in the end? And the answer is very simple, is that you can look at education one of two ways. Either I'm telling you something right now you don't know, or you might, but you don't know, right? And you're learning for the first time. Or you already know every single thing I'm telling you, but it's on an unconscious level. It's what the angel taught you and you forgot. Forgot means it's in there still, but you don't have access to it. Your brain, has everything you've ever experienced is inside your brain. One of the advantages of a computer is that knowledge is stored and we know how to access it wherever it is. Once upon a time, before they have today, but in the old days, when you wanted to erase something from a disk, it just broke the connection between where you were and the idea itself, so you couldn't get to it. But the idea was still there. Your brain is a library of all your experiences. It's all inside there, but accessing it. That's why when you try to remember something, you may not remember it first, it takes some time, but you're accessing it over time. So the education, it turns out, it's not about learning new things. It's about remembering old things. That's all I'm doing right now. That's what the Torah is doing. That's what every teacher does with a student, whether they realize it or not. By saying the information on the outside, it triggers it on the inside and brings it to the conscious mind, which is why they say so often, even after hearing a new idea, you have the sense of, yeah, right. That makes sense. Well, how do you know? It's the first time you're hearing it. Well, not really. Somehow it resonates inside and comes to the conscious mind. So what's really going on then, when I'm learning the Nun Shari Bina, the 50 gates of understanding, what I'm actually doing is accessing the Nun Shari Bina, which is the basis of my soul. I'm accessing my soul. That's why when a person goes deep into Torah, they actually go deeper into themselves. It's not two journeys. You're not going from one level to another level and learning and staying the same, hopefully. But what you're actually doing instead is you're accessing deeper levels of soul, because as we know, there are 4 levels of Torah learning, what we call pardes, which means an orchard, but it stands for pshat, remez, drush, and sod, which means a simple explanation of a word, the hint. Then you have what's called drush, which is exegetical, and then you have sod, which is Kabbalah based. I'll give you a very fast example. The word Bereshis, the first word of the Torah, Bereshis, means in the beginning. In the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth. That's what it means. But Rashi points out it's grammatically incorrect. That's not the way you should write in the beginning if you want to say that concept. How should it be? Berishona. That would mean the beginning of something, that God made the heaven and the earth. Now, if a human's writing a book, then you might, either they didn't know grammar properly, or they just made a mistake and put the wrong word there, or even the publisher sometimes. But this is God. God dictated the Torah letter by letter, word by word to Moshe. And then Moshe wrote it down exactly the way. So if it says Bereshis, it means that God intended it to be Bereshis, but it's not the right word. So if you look at Rashi, he says, oh, but it is the right word, because God is hinting to us a deeper explanation for the person who wants to go a little bit deeper. That's called remez. That's a hint. What's the hint? The fact that it's not the right word. Then what word should it, what does it mean? So Rashi explains. Bereshis is 2 words. There's a base and reshis, which means for the sake of reshis. And Rashi explains that the Jewish people are called reshis. It means the first is something, and Torah is called reshis. So really the verse reads on the deeper level of hint. For the sake of Torah and the sake of the Jewish people, God made the world. That's the second level. That we had the pshat, that was the pay, and the resh, that's the rem is the hint. What's the drush? What's the next level up? Like medrash, right? If you look in the the medrash, there's all these stories and the backstory for so much of the Chumash itself, right? But what's the drush over here? So the medrash says that the word bereshis can be divided into 2 parts. Bara, shis. He created 6. And you'll tell me 6 in Aramaic, but there's an explanation for that. There's a couple of words in the Torah that are Aramaic. That's not a new idea. But right, so the Medrash is telling us that the discussion that they have amongst the commentaries is, did God make everything at the first moment and then just present it on each day? Or did he make things day by day? In other words, did the sun and the moon and the stars, did he make it from scratch on the 4th day? Or were they made on the first day, and then God just revealed them on the 4th day? So this says the latter. That's called drush, because it's not something you can get from a hint. It's something you have to know either tradition for, or the back information. That's that level. Then what about Kabbalah? What about the last level, sod, right? The same thing. Barashis, 2 words. He created, and she's 6. But in this case, the 6 refer to the 6 spheres of Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, which are the basis of our 6,000 years of history, and that's a Kabbalistic discussion. You don't need to understand that right now. I got books that can go into detail. You can even look online to understand that idea. But that's not the point. The point over here is look at their 4 levels of Torah learning. And they take you closer and closer. And these 4 levels, you have 5 levels of soul. Every individual has 1 soul, but that 1 soul has 5 parts. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechida. They span the entire world. Your body may be only 5'10" or 5'6", but your soul is huge. It goes way beyond your body. But the level of spirituality a person lives on depends completely on the level of soul they can access. And that's not an automatic thing. The lowest level, called nefesh, is the one that runs your body. It's your car engine, right? It's the one that determines your basic nature and your breathing, takes care of. Even animals have a nefesh. So we share that with the animal world. And we act like that when we live on that level only. We can be very animalistic. It doesn't guarantee any kind of spirituality whatsoever to have the level of nefesh. You want to become more spiritual? You have to go up a level, right? That's the next level up, which is called ruach. And that level corresponds to the level of remez in the learning. And they go one level higher, which is neshama. On that level of neshama, you're pretty righteous now. You're you're an extremely spiritual person at that point. And then the last level of Kabbalah corresponds to the level called Chaya. The point being that when a person goes deeper into Torah, they go deeper into themselves. People go out east to find out who they are. Great, great. East, nice, probably a nice place to visit. Nice, a good experience you can talk about later on. But that's not where you are. I mean, the truth is the surroundings. If they're more spiritual, you get to the top of the Himalayas, you stand by the Grand Canyon or go to the Swiss Alps, or even there's Israel, there are places that are actually awesome to look at, experience. It will bring out more spirituality. But if you want to know where you really are, who you really are, it's inside. The journey is in. And the way we do that is through something called Pardes. Pshat, Remez, Drushim, so it's different levels of, right now, we're covering several of those levels right now as we speak. And if you feel the difference, It's different. Like this moment for me is different than it was a half an hour ago before I started. Before I started, it was in a whole different level of consciousness. Now, because of the discussion we're having and going to these ideas, you feel like you're going higher experience. That's what the Nun Shari Bina are all about. So now we come back to what the Megillah is actually telling us, right? Then we can understand that something a lot deeper was going on, a lot deeper than simply a bunch of people who were victorious miraculously, made a big celebration called the Purim, and then moved on. Something far more significant historically, which now helps us to understand this next Gemara, which I will read to you, and we're almost done with the sources, right? And then we'll just wrap it up with understanding the whole concept and how they got Purim, what Purim has to offer us. This is what it says. The Torah says that Moshe brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stood at the base of the mountain. That's in Parashat Yisro. They stood at the bottom of the mountain. Again, you don't have to elucidate that. The simple understanding on a pshat level is they were all camped at the base of the mountain. But the Gemara is trying to communicate ideas to us. The Gemara is like somebody who has all this information, but he can't just blurt it out. He has to find ways to teach it to you. So therefore, they look for stories and excuses. The Gemara is unfolding, stories and revealing concepts because it was the oral law. It's the basis of everything that we live by. It explains the whole written law. Without it, it's like a body without a soul. So the Gemara says that they stood at the base of the mountain. Rabbi Avdimi Bar Chassa said the Jewish people actually stood beneath the mountain. We understand it to mean the obvious thing. The obvious thing is they're standing at the foot of the mountain. What's complicated about that? The Gemara says no. They were actually underneath the mountain. What does that even mean? So the Gemara says that when they're standing down there and God said, "Hi, I'm God, and I brought my Torah," right? The classic joke, how much does it cost? Free, we'll take two, right? So God says, "Here's my Torah, and I would like you to accept it. What do you say?" And, what's in it, what's involved? We're thinking, so God picks up the mountain, literally uproots the mountain, holds it over the heads of the Jewish people like a huge barrel, and says, if you accept it, great. I put the mountain back and we go on with the rest of history. If you don't accept it, I'm dropping the mountain on top of you, and that's the end of your story and the whole story in the end. It's like someone putting a gun to someone's head, God forbid, and saying your money or your life, but don't let the gun influence you. It's just a gun. I know it's and I probably would shoot you if you don't give me the money. You have to take, but let it be your free will decision. Ignore the gun. What do you mean ignore the gun? This is right against my head. How can I say no, to someone like that? So God holds the mountain over the head of the Jewish people and says, now choose. So of course we're going to say yes. How can you not say yes? Unless you have a death wish. But there's a problem with that explanation. Because you look into Chumash and Parashat Mishpatim, we utter, when God says, you want my Torah, we're praised, we're famous for saying two words, Naaseh v'nishma. We will do it and we will understand it as we go along. We don't need to know in advance everything, what it means. It's coming from you, you're reliable, God, we'll go with it. And then we'll work on it later on. The Gemara calls us the language of the angels. God says, who revealed the language of the angels to my children, that they would say such an incredible thing of Naaseh v'nishma? The world doesn't understand that. Everybody else you go to and say, and God did apparently, you want my Torah? What's in it? What's it all about? What does this thing mean? Wait a second. I'm not going to sign on the dotted line till I know all the details. I don't know what I'm getting myself into. Not the Jewish people, right? We said Naaseh v'nishma. But if we said Naaseh v'nishma because it was a mountain over our head, then what's the point? What would we gain? There was nothing special about that. Anybody would have said it. So Tosfos says, well, yes and no. Because we know there are two parts to Torah. There are two parts of Torah that we call the written law, Torah Shebiksav, and the oral law, Torah Shebal Peh. The Gemara says that God only made the bris with the Jewish people because of the oral law. The oral law, oh, what a history. Everybody struggled with it. The Hellenists try to cancel it out. You know, the Reform and Conservative movement today, for the most part, that's the sticking point. Everybody's got pretty much the same Chumash, the same Sefer Torah in the Aron HaKodesh. The question is, what's on the shelf to explain it? Is it the Shulchan Aruch or somebody else's interpretation in modern day terms? The Torah Shebal Peh. That was the whole. So when it came to the written law, and God said, "You accept the written law, Naaseh v'nishma." We don't need any coercion. We like it. It sounds great. It's wonderful. We'll do it, right? And then after God said, well, it comes also with the Shulchan Aruch. It comes with Mishnayos, comes with Gemara, comes with all the halachas, comes with thousands of years of discussions to explain the halachas. That's all part of Torah Shebal Peh. Then we said, whoa, wait a second. That's a tall order. We don't know. We just came out of Egypt, we just left slavery. We're not looking to go back into slavery. That's when God lifted the mountain up and said, either accept it or this is your burial place right here. Now, it's not really conclusive that God actually did that. The Maharal explains that doesn't mean that for other obvious reasons. It means that because the revelation of God at Mount Sinai was so intense. I mean, God's talking to the Jewish people. It's not like your neighbor talking to you. It's not even like the president, the prime minister, or the chief rabbi talking to you. It's nothing like that. It's another human being. God talking to you is the holiest, most Kabbalistic experience. They died. They died twice. When God spoke the first commandment, boom, they all dropped dead. He revived them. He gave the second commandment, boom, they dropped dead again. Not because it was just overwhelming. The body couldn't handle that much ecstasy. They died. And then they turned to Moshe at that point in time and said, Moshe, this dying business is like getting a little tiring. It's hard on our bodies. So you got to talk to God for us. So he did. The rest of the Torah came through Moshe, but they heard it's a whole different experience. It's nothing that we're used to. So because of that, who could say no to God? At Mount Sinai, who in their right mind could say no to God? So it's as if God held the mountain over the heads of the Jewish people. But the problem is like this. No matter how you look at it, it means that they never had a chance to really make that choice with free will. It was heavily influenced at Mount Sinai. Had to be. At the beginning, we had no choice. That's the way. It would have been nice if we'd gotten to the level through our development and growth between Pesach and Shavuos to be able to say, yes, we'll do it with all the right intentions and all the right, thinking. But that wasn't the situation back then. And God knew that. And God accepted that. That wasn't a problem. But we needed to accept it at some point in time. And so the Gemara says the following thing. It says from here, the Jewish people could say, we were coerced into Torah. But the Gemara comes in and says, yeah, but nonetheless, they accepted it willingly in Achashverosh's time. How do we know that? Because the Megillah says, Kimu v'kiblu, that they established it, they fulfilled it, and they accepted it willingly. That Purim actually was Kabbalah Torah, the receiving of Torah, part 2, the completion of it. The process began in 2448 or 1313 BCE when the Jewish people left Mitzrayim, left Egypt, and the process was completed for all of history on Purim in Mordechai's time over 1,500 years later. But what happened though? Like why? Well, like you look in the Megillah, there's no mention of the oral law. There's no discussion of the oral law. All there's this discussion of Amalek going, fighting against the Jewish people. So I'm going to show you an amazing thing, right? 2 psukim that define the Jewish people, define what we do every single day, defines why God created us and why he supports us and why he takes care of us. 2 psukim that we say to remind ourselves every single day what we're doing here. One is Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and the other one is Baruch Shem Kavod Machuso Le'olam Ved. I'm sure you recognize them, right? Hear, O Israel, the Lord God, the Lord is one. And the second verse is, blessed be the name of his glorious king forever, his glorious kingdom forever. That's what it says. If you take the gematria of Baruch Shem Kavod and you add up all the letters, because each letter, 2 and 200, you add them all up, you get, I think, 1358. If you add up the gematria, the letters of Shema Yisrael, it's 1,118. If you subtract the gematria of the Shema from Baruch Shem Kavod, you get 240. And 240 is the gematria of Amalek. And also the Hebrew word Safek, which means doubt. Because the whole thing of Amalek, the whole thing of Hitler, the whole thing of any enemy of the Jewish people, of Amalek, is to make Jews doubt divine providence. To doubt that God exists, but if you're going to believe that God exists, at least doubt that he's involved in history, but doubt. To lack that clarity. So the Shema is the clarity of the angels. It's the clarity of the Jewish people when they're living on the proper level of Torah and they're acting the proper levels of Neshama, and what's going to happen in the Messianic era where we're all going to see and be able to feel, not just see, by the way, but even to feel it. Like it'll be palpable. You'll be able to feel the presence of God at that time. And Baruch Shem Kavod represents this stage of history right now. And what's the difference between now and the Messianic era? Amalek, Safek, doubt in God, doubt in divine providence, doubt that God is involved in every last detail of history. Why? Because look at all the bad things that happen to good people, all the confusion we have to live. How can God be behind all of this? When you have people questioning the whole concept of gender, right? Went to Google the other day to do something to validate my telephone number, and one of the things they ask you along the way is, "What's your gender?" And there's male, female, and something else, and the last one was, "You don't want to discuss it, don't want to talk about it, don't want to reveal." It's like, where does it come from? How's God's behind that too? And what happened on October 7th? That's supposed to be part of his master plan. And of course, the Holocaust. I mean, and before that, and just, Jewish history as a whole. And that Haman could rise to power. Okay, Baruch Hashem, Purim was a fantastic victory, but look at the struggles we had until we got to that point. And by Hanukkah time, we weren't successful in the end, and we've been struggling and limping all through history, just like Yaakov walked away from his battle with the angel, limping away, a sign of Jewish history. So people struggle. And what we don't realize is that the less real we are with God in everyday life, on every moment that we're living, the less joy, the less simcha we can have in life. One of the main reasons why there's such an emphasis on entertainment, one of the main reasons why people spend so much money on food and clothing is to have more joy in life. But the rule of thumb is the less spiritual a society is, the more they will spend on things like that, the more they'll spend on materialism. I don't know if you've noticed, I mean, I noticed this myself personally, and other people have told me the exact same thing. Just moving to Eretz Israel, you don't feel the same need. You don't feel the same connection to materialism as you did outside the land. And one of the reasons why is because you're closer to God. You're feeling the reality of God more, whether you know it or not. That's one of the reasons why so many people in Eretz Israel are either going in that direction or they fight so strongly against it. In the diaspora, in Chutz La'aretz, a person could be a secular Jew and no one's going to bother them. They're not going to feel like they're at war against God. But in Eretz Israel, it's like a piece of Scotch tape you can't get off your finger. It's just all around you. It's Eretz Israel. It's Eretz HaKodesh, a holy land. It's the reality of God that you're feeling all the time. And that's the source of joy a person's supposed to experience. And that's why Purim became the receiving of Torah part 2. And why they did it willingly. And why it's the nun was righted, right? It was upside down when they left Egypt and they left Mount Sinai. It's upside down almost every day of history in this last 5,000 some odd years. But Purim was the one time it turned right side up. We had a view, a clear view at God, so to speak, as much as humanly possible, of how, even despite the fact that everything looks chaotic and out of order and out of control and random, it was actually God moving all the pieces around the entire time. And to know that despite all that they went through, that they experienced, that hidden reality inside that was covered up until then became revealed to them, that's when they realized that the oral law was also indispensable, and they had to live with it. Because anybody who's ever tried to, that's the ironic thing, is anybody who's ever said that the oral law is rabbinic only, and therefore we need not live by it, it's not necessary, always ends up writing their own. Because there's no way to know what tefillin is supposed to look like without an oral law, without some explanation. What is kashrus? How do you know how to kasher meat or to shecht an animal? The Torah just doesn't have to have kosher meat. It doesn't know how to do it. You have to have it. But that's the thing that Purim represents the most. Purim says, that's why we wear costumes, and that's why we get drunk. And I'll finish with a story, one of the nicest stories, mushals, that I ever heard, that, to explain the idea of drinking. It came from Hutner. That's all. He was the Rosh HaShavua of Chaim Berlin in the 50s and 60s, and a very famous rabbi, for those who are not familiar with the name. And he wrote some very astonishing works on Torah itself, very deep thinking ideas. But they once asked him, what's the point of drinking on Purim? And he explained with analogy, with a mashal. Mashal is always great for making these points. And he says that it's like two boys who grew up in a shtetl, let's say the 1800s, before all this transportation and mail service and like that. And they were best friends from the very beginning. They went to cheder together. They went to yeshiva katana together, yeshiva gadol. They learned, they were chavrusas. They learned together. They were inseparable. But they got to the age of 18, 19, and their parents were looking to make a shidduch for them with somebody who could afford to support them in their learning. So as it turned out, that one was set up with a girl over there, and one was set up with a girl over there, far away from each other. And they said their goodbyes and promised to stay in touch. In the beginning, they wrote letters, but it takes, in those days, it could take weeks if the letters got there at all. And as they grew up, and they were already married by now, and they had children, and they took jobs and positions, and they grew in their learning and everything. Eventually, the letters stopped going and coming, and they almost pretty much forgot about each other. It happens. It happens in life over many over time, especially without social media and all these communication devices we have today. Not was once a long time ago. Anyhow, so they both had occasion, according to Divine Providence, had occasion once to be traveling. They were taking the train and ended up at the same train station. But by now they were older, gray hair, beards, wearing a frock, perhaps, and maybe overweight a bit. They didn't look like they did when they left each other, and they didn't send pictures back and forth to know. They heard about each other, bits and pieces, but not more than that. Anyhow, they walked past each other. They didn't even recognize each other at first, but something inside said, "Hey, who's that person?" And they both turned around exactly the same time. They faced each other, and David, Shlomo, is that you? They could not believe their eyes. They could not believe the divine providence, right? And they literally ran to each other. They dropped their bags and they embraced. They even walked to the bench, embracing with each other. And they sat down and they said, "I heard so much about you. Tell me about your family." They're trying to get as much information as possible. And 5 minutes into the conversation, the whistle blows. The train's ready to leave. And they look at each other. Which way are you going? I'm going east. Oh, no, I'm going west. How can it be after all this time that we can't spend more time together? And who knows if we'll ever see each other again? What do we do? We're not going to Zoom each other. It's not going to come around for hundreds of years. What do we do? So one says, I bought this bottle of wine where it was, and I was actually going to save it for Shabbos, but I think this is a more special occasion. You take half the bottom of glass, and I'll take the bottom. You go to your conductor of your train, I'll go to the conductor of my train. We'll get them drunk, and nobody will go anywhere for at least a good hour. What's the nimshal? What was he saying? We come into this world as neshamas, as souls. You look at a baby. He's such a soul. That's why children have such chen, because they're just pure, they're souls. And then we start to grow up, and we lose our chen, because we start to become more concerned with superficial things. We become insecure. We have to worry about this and worry about that in school and family issues and bar mitzvahs and bas mitzvahs and you name it. And then, of course, you have to worry about finances. We get so, as they say, life happens. Life happens. And you get so distracted and you become so affected by your bodily drives that you forget what it means to be a soul. So on Yom Kippur, Baruch Hashem, we try to get back into it. Not everybody, as much as we possibly can, but it's hard once a year if you're not doing it all the time. So Rav Hutner said, that's what we drink on Purim. We don't drink to lose ourselves. We drink to find ourselves. We neutralize the conductor. The body's like a conductor going from place to place to place all the time. Always running around, always busy, always distracted. The soul doesn't get a word in. Even we do mitzvahs, the body is heavily involved a lot of times. So on Purim, we neutralize the body to allow the soul to come out. That your soul can come out and see the other souls of the other people around you, to remind yourselves that you're based in the Nun Shari Bina. You're based in that world that Reb ben Levi's son saw when he went to Shemaim momentarily, briefly. Now take that and live with it. Not just because you have to, because you want to, because that is the source of all the joy that we have in life. It's the source of all of our growth. It's the source of all the positive influence we exude and have on the world around us. Otherwise, we're just walking around, like rats in a wheel, going in circles, doing whatever you have to survive from day to day. But that's not called living. When the Torah says, "B'charta b'chayim," choose life, that's what it means. And Purim, once a year, gives us that opportunity, even more than Yom Kippur. That's why it's called Yom Kippurim, a day like Purim. The last holiday be canceled out because it's on the level of Chachma, such phenomenal wisdom, gives us the opportunity to be able to experience this and hopefully, like it enough, love it enough to take it with us the rest of the year.